Long ago, a race of highly advanced humanoids roamed the stars, seeding life on many worlds, using their own DNA as a model to create other life forms, some of which would evolve into interstellar powers, such as humans, Klingons, and Romulans. Another famous species that found their origins in these beings came to be known as the Cardassians, hailing from the planet Cardassia Prime. Before the formation of the modern Cardassian government, they were known as the Hebitians, a spiritual culture famed for their art and architecture. They were also known to bury their dead in elaborate tombs filled with jewels, treasure, and artwork. The humanoids of this world evolved to have gray skin, two vertical ridges on their neck leading to their head, and a tear or spoon-shaped ridge on their foreheads. They also preferred darker, hotter, and more humid environments. In the 16th century, a Bajoran lightship designed for short-range spaceflight was transported to Cardassia Prime when it made contact with tachyon eddies that created a warp-style jump through space. Unfortunately, the voyage did heavy damage to the ships, causing them to crash land on the Hebitian homeworld. And while this was a noteworthy historical landmark for the Bajorans, the later Cardassian government denied these early flights ever took place, until the 24th century, when Captain Benjamin Sisko and his son proved the journey was possible, forcing them to admit the truth. Aside from the mineral Jevonite, the Hebitians had few resources they could extract from their home planet, and as a result, by the 19th century, were facing widespread famine and disease. The ruling powers were then replaced with a new government led by the military, which would reform their society to ensure its survival. Ruling this newly formed Cardassian government was the Detapa Council, overseeing Central Command, which led the military, and the Obsidian Order, which ran espionage and intelligence operations. Although many were involved in the transition to a new form of government, Tret Aklim was often noted as the father of the Cardassian Union. The drastic reformation within society changed their values and morality, creating a foundation for their new lives based entirely on devotion to the family unit and ultimately the state. The government in turn ensured its citizens were fed and had all that was necessary to thrive. Cardassians came to respect a rigid hierarchy within their culture, often engaging in espionage and underhanded tactics as they ruthlessly competed against each other to obtain power within the structure. As a result, Cardassians were highly suspicious not only of other species but also each other. The humanoids of this world, who were once a highly religious and spiritual people, left that behind when the new ruling power declared a non-theist government. Over the centuries, they became less and less superstitious, believing their own actions determined outcomes, rather than relying on gods or luck. As the citizenry fell into a subservient role to the government, practicality became highly valued, believing that the ends justify the means. Using this philosophy as a guiding principle, their legal system consisted of a show trial in which all criminals were found guilty even before the trial began, and so the televised event was in reality just a way for the prisoner to confess in order to reassure the Cardassian population that the government was always right and criminals were always caught. This unique idea about devotion to the state even influenced their art and literature, as seen in the famous tale The Never-Ending Sacrifice, an epic story spanning 7 generations within a Cardassian family which displayed selfless obedience to Cardassia. Education was also highly valued in their society, with intense mental training giving most Cardassians incredible memories, even attaining sufficient mental discipline to resist Vulcan mind melds. Courtship rituals were based around conversation, with passionate argument and debate seen as forms of flirtation. And while females primarily went into the sciences and engineering, some joined their male counterparts in the military and government. The Cardassian military was known to use surprise tactics, traps, and espionage in their strategies, often creating complex and intricate plans to defeat their enemies. Over the next 5 centuries, the Cardassian Union sent the military to colonize new worlds and systems, gaining access to essential resources and expanding their territory greatly within the Alpha Quadrant. However, as their borders grew, so did their population and need for more resources. By the 22nd century, Cardassia Prime struggled once again with widespread famine, so when the ancient Hebitian tombs were discovered, the rich treasures and art hidden away was ransacked by locals. In addition, any relics able to be preserved and held in museums were later sold by the government to feed their population. In the same century, a species of powerful aliens known as the Organians performed an experiment on a group of Cardassians, infecting them with a deadly virus to see how they would react. And while the healthy initially showed compassion for the sick, they eventually killed the infected in order to save the group. although it is uncertain when exactly first contact between Cardassians and humans was established. By the year 2152, both sides were exploring the same areas of space. In the 23rd century, the Cardassian government fell temporarily, allowing for the rise of the First Republic. This period became known for serialist poetry, as exemplified by the author Elogia of Prim, who was eventually exiled to Vulcan. By the 24th century, the Detapa Council was once again in power. However, after so many years of rule, the group began to slide to the background, with Central Command and the Obsidian Order rising to prominence and acting largely as independent powers. In 2319, the continuous need for more resources to supply the Cardassian Union led the military to begin efforts to occupy Bajor, then formally annexing the planet in 2328. Believing themselves to be the superior race, the Cardassians were ruthless overlords, mocking the primitive religious beliefs of the local population while using them as forced labor and stealing their resources. However, the Bajorans were not content to simply live as servants and slaves, creating a rebel movement that used guerrilla tactics and terroristic attacks to fight back against their technologically superior oppressors. By 2369, the Bajorans had done so much damage and caused such chaos among the occupation army, the Cardassians withdrew, granting victory to Bajor. And while the Cardassian Union saw this as a humiliating defeat, it was but one of many 24th century conflicts that would ultimately lead them to utter devastation. A special thanks to all those who contribute to Civilization X, like Jampo the Mad, Grandmaster Pupper of the Took, and Nate Strong the Liberator. If you would like to help Civilization X, click on the Patreon link, and please be sure to like and subscribe, and click on the links to see more.